Welcome to Life's Rich Tapestry, a podcast exploring the narrative of people's layered lives. Listen in on courageous conversations spoken from the heart. Gain insight into another's life as we tackle compelling topics which will expand your mind, help you gain perspective, and might even inspire you to do things differently. My name is Evelyn, and I look forward to your company. And welcome to another episode of Life's Rich Tapestry. Now, the Music Hunter Project was founded in 2010 as a response to a need for increased opportunities for musicians and audiences in the Upper Blue Mountains and beyond. The main focus has been to enrich the cultural landscape by curating a wide diversity of music, with excellence being the common denominator, and in so doing, contributing to the cohesion of the community. Music Hunter has run over 200 events with audience capacities between 70 and 1,500. Of course, during the COVID pandemic, strict adherence to government restrictions regarding social distancing and crowd numbers were followed. The idea was conceived by the multi-talented, highly qualified, and uber-resilient Meg Benson. And on today's show, I am so honored to have Meg with me. Welcome to the show, Meg.
Hi, Evelyn.
Yeah, it's so good to have you here. Now, I absolutely love your story. I've been reading a lot about you for the last week or so. You probably felt the energy, like someone is trolling me. So I think your story, it deserves to be started at the beginning. So just for our listeners, so let's just start. Where were you born, your parents, and how did that all work? Let's start from the beginning there.
Well, I was born in Grafton of New South Wales, which is that purple jacaranda town, and not far from Coffs Harbour, just a bit more inland. My father was a pharmacist, rugby player, rower, music lover. My mum, she had been at uni and they met there in Brizzy Uni. She was going to possibly be a nun. Later, she was thinking of being a school teacher, but she got a bit too freaked out on a prac with the kids.
Yeah.
And then she became a full-time mum. They separated when I was 4.
Now, are you the eldest or?
Second oldest.
Yes,
I have a brother who was just 16 months older than me. So she did have a hands full with 2 kids in nappies at the same time.
Yeah. And did you grow up, were you close?
Yeah, although some things changed, parents separating.
Yeah.
I think there was a phase where my brother went to live with my dad, but I'm just trying to think. That was actually after New Zealand. Mum moved to Sydney when they separated.
And how old were you then?
I was 4 at the age of that separation, but the trip up north was a regular thing that happened in school holidays until approximately age 10, when my dad and stepmother went to live and work in Europe for a whole year. She was a language teacher, and so she did an exchange over there.
So you stayed with your mom during that time? Yeah.
No.
Oh, you did go?
No,
okay.
we actually went to stay with relatives. My brother and I stayed in a completely different country without our significant parents for a whole year.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. Well, I was told at the time by Mum that it was because she was having a nervous breakdown. But later I hear from her also that Auntie actually asked if we could go over there, I guess to let Dad off the hook of his school holiday responsibilities that year. And I guess it could have been a bit anecdotal, like, I'm going to have a nervous breakdown unless I get a rest during the school holidays. So I think it's sort of, at my understanding, I went there because Mum was literally like, I'm going to have a nervous breakdown. Went to live with an auntie and uncle that already had 3 boys and 1 adopted girl. Yeah, my brother was really angry at that time, acting out a bit. We were in the Hastings Napier area.
Okay, so New Zealand, yeah.
Yeah. My brother was just in that phase where he was acting out a bit. But I guess at that stage, my capacity to use my imagination and exercise choice for a good life was already kicking in. I'm not really sure where I got it from in terms of adversity, but when there was tension in the house and, the father of the house getting the belt out for the strap for the boys if they were naughty, I and my brother acting out, either, we were just kids and away from our parents. So I think I was a bit of the target for him. I just asked if I could go and live at my Auntie Barbara's house, who was a school teacher, an art teacher, and she had a swimming pool. And probably the first few months I realised I registered, I didn't really feel comfortable there, and I was able to ask if I could go to Auntie Barbara's, and that was fine. So that was great, and took up swimming over there. So I had a way to kind of, you can imagine at that age, it's quite a big thing on a child, but I was able to have a discipline of swimming training, and I took up swimming training in Heratonga Swimming Club. Actually, it was cool. I'd had a false tooth from an accident when I was a child, but there was a girl who had a glass eye. And I remember from the freakiness of, feeling like you had a false tooth and you're a bit of a freak, getting, the other girl who had a glass eye, it was often rescued by the bigger boys who had to swim down and get it when she was swimming.
Oh, my gosh. It's funny what we remember.
And I remember they gave us a really big hungy farewell when we came back to Australia at the end of the year.
So after the year in New Zealand, did you come back, move in with your mum again?
Yeah.
Okay.
So my brother and I moved back, but I think shortly after my brother down the track, there was a shift to my dad and my stepmother's, and then shortly after that, he went to boarding school from there. I'm a bit vague on the actual months of that.
Yeah.
Look, my mum would say she was, I guess, suffering from single parenthood at a time where it was really quite new, when she was in the first wave of women that could divorce without fault.
Yeah.
But it was also like some of those services and things were still kicking in. She did have a single parent pension, and she was quite creative and resourceful in her own right. She chose to rent really large, beautiful places in Mossman. Could have lived anywhere, but wanted us to be in places with trees and, nice surroundings, and then sublet out. The landlords kind of knew then that she was doing that was okay. They didn't mind. I grew up in a sort of co-housing shared environment, which is kind of, I guess, getting back on the discussion table now in terms of the housing problems.
Yeah, no, that's right. I found that interesting. So how long were you living in this share sort of situation? For many years, or how?
I think in the house in Avenue Road in Mossman was a fantastic house. That one was between 4 and 10 or something, or 4 and 9. Mm-hmm. And then I remember when we came back from New Zealand, we were in the Vista Street house in Mossman, the one that leads up to the old Mossman Hotel. And, the Avenue Road one led down to the wharf. So both quite handy spots, and went to Mossman infants, primary and high school. Yeah,
so your mum was quite resourceful then, really, getting you in the best neighborhoods, but making sure people were living with you. How was that experience, though, living with different people at such a young age?
Yeah, it was interesting. I think, it was a mixed bag, definitely.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, I mean, there's the odd loose cannon, party animal, just think, 80s, 70s and 80s, right? Uh-huh. I can remember some sort of coked up party animals, and actually the parties were some of the best times of my life. As I mentioned, for me it was the connection with people and people having good times, because in the day-to-day life, Mum seemed to express a fair bit of sorrow at her position, or sort of a bit of resentment at being a single mum based on the difficulty at that time. It's understandable. That was one thing. Like, I made a decision that, even though I've experienced single parenthood, I made a decision that there was no way I was going to be resentful, in which case I really explored what are the things that make me happy. And long before I ever became a music promoter, I'd already adopted a notion of getting my wallet out and paying for a cover charge at least once a fortnight.
Yeah. And I'm sure it started from that sort of experience, because there was a lot of music in the house, wasn't there, growing up?
mean, there might have been a couple of parties a year that had live music, and then there would have been the odd going out to festivals with various people in the band. Tantalon, I saw at the age of 10 all the most iconic bands like Midnight Oil, Men at Work, Goanna.
And it was happening in the 80s, wasn't it, during that time in Sydney? Yeah. I mean, bands were really big back then, weren't they?
Well, we went to some lovely pubs, iconic places like the Cat and Fiddle.
Yeah.
Some things that we could go to, we'd see some ska bands and things. Some things you could go to where it was perfectly okay for an under 18 to go. But since I moved out of home at 14 and a half, I had also that capacity to sneak out underage to live music because I was literally my own guardian.
And now, how did that? Because I did read that. And
That's
I'm like,
a bit of a turn of events.
14 and a half. That is so young.
I think what it was is that, you know, the compassionate side of how difficult it is for a single mum, but the feeling of what it translates to in a lived experience is a feeling that you're somehow to blame a bit for another person's condition. And I really did have this vision that, like, life could be happier than that, and I was really looking for a sense of community, of where I felt like I belonged and where I was respected. Like, it's not that I wasn't loved, and I wouldn't be so arrogant to say that. I think it's when people's I was definitely loved by my mum. But it's the person's capacity to show that, or if their fears get in the way of expressing it and they're always looking for negativities because their consciousness is more fear-based.
Yeah.
It's hard for people to come from a strengths-based perspective and actually let you know they believe in you or trust you. I guess that's one of the reasons why when I moved out, I wanted to show people that, you know, I could stay at school and I could do these, you know, things, and that by being interested in my happiness, I wasn't rejecting important things in life. I wanted to stay in contact with my mum. I wasn't closing the door and being like, I'm running away. It was just like, I just can't be happy in this climate.
Environment. Yeah.
She did go to AA, and I mean, look, there are so many things I'm grateful for my mum. As I mentioned, her she had these kind of progressive social values, and that was one of the good things about the share house. I remember us having Aboriginal land rights party. Everyone wore red, black and yellow and donated money, and there people having philosophical and political conversations, eating curry on the low furniture, you know, back in that of the
futons and stuff.
And Mum also went to Sydney acting school, so she did that for a bit, and she was in a number of ads and a couple of series and a couple of sort of extras in movies, and I didn't really pursue that greatly, but I think she enjoyed what she did. I think the stress of parenting was something that was real for her. And she, I mean, I can say this now as a historical thing. She's, you know, hasn't touched any drugs or alcohols for a long time, but she did used to sell marijuana to supplement our activities. But guess what? She supplemented amazing activities. I went to dancing all day Saturday. I did tap, jazz, ballet and gymnastics. And then when I'd come back from New Zealand, I kept up with the swimming at North Sydney Swimming Pool, and I'd get myself there on the bus, and at night I'd get picked up afterwards either by mum or someone else in the house. And so I was able to continue with swimming. And I ended up coming fourth in the state in 100 metres butterfly.
Amazing.
But so I had these really bizarre contradictions in me between this discipline to achieve things, but this an element of defiance around I can make my own mind up, I'll choose something better, or, you know, but also like if I say I'm going to do something, I did it.
You did it,
like in the house, I was happy in the share house to have equal contributions. Like even as a child, I loved that we all rotated on like who's in the kitchen, who's on weeding, who did, you know, and all that kind of stuff that people do in a share house. And I was proud to tick my name off. I did the bathroom this week. Look how good it is. Or, you know, and so there was quite a responsible side.
At 14 and a half, who would have you lived with though? Because you had to live somewhere.
Absolutely. Good question. And back then, see, like they hadn't brought in, the thing of like no services can help anyone under 16.
Yeah.
It was like from 16 only. But back then, no, I just walked straight into the community service, to social service. And I said, hi, my name's Megan Benson. I'm not happy at home. I'm determined to stay at school and I'm moving out. I've got a place to move. I had met a uni student. I was away on a holiday with some friends, a friend from school. Her father was taking him up to Crescent Head. Mm-hmm. I happened to step on some juicy hell of a potent bee that just swelled my whole foot right up. My toes look like balloons. My foot looks like balloons. My ankles were the size of my calf muscle. And during that time, while my friends probably just continued to enjoy their holiday, I was sitting around on antihistamines and talking to the girl who was camped next to us, who was about 20, 21 or something, and maybe 20 at the time. And she was scooting around Australia on a motorbike. And I was used to having adult conversations. I grew up in a share house. So we just talked about life, philosophy, looked out, sitting on a seat, looking out at the ocean and stuff. And we stayed in contact. And probably approximately 4 months later, I talked to about not really being that happy at home. She had a room in the house that she was co-sharing.
Okay.
Actually, it wasn't a room. It was a sunroom. So I wouldn't have had privacy, but they were like, we can put a curtain up for you and you can stay there for $20 a week, because it's not even a room. It's just an extra $20 plus, maybe a contribution to electricity or something. And I moved stuff in there out of my room. Being a young person, you only own what was in your bedroom anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
I had my record player and I used to play Dark Side of the Moon album on record as my sleep lullaby. I mean, it was kind of, a tumultuous time, and you needed every bit of like angles of like giving yourself love and reassurance. And that Pink Floyd album was definitely
it brings you back.
It was quite an amazing album.
Yeah, it is. It is quite an amazing album. So 14 and a half, so you move in with this girl in the sunroom.
Yeah, so she's got her room, and there was, I think there was another lady in the house who used to do phone sex. She was a bit of a
she was a what? Oh,
yeah. I didn't know much about her. It was just like Becky just was sort of muttered something about her. But there was another lovely girl, Jenny, who later I bumped into up here, who was connected to the meditation centre or someone at the meditation centre. But she was a real sweetheart and a real gentle person. But within about 3 or something months, we found some other people to move into a bigger place in Artarm, and that was in Crow's Nest, so I could still catch the bus to school.
And you could still go to school. And so you continued going to school.
And I was literally the legal guardian. So if for some reason I had a misadventure, I went out to live music somewhere, which, I believed, I didn't really want to go out to get trashed. I just want to be included in the social, cultural experiences. So if I sort of went out to live music, and most of the time I came back to school and I was pretty good, but certainly, I'm human and I didn't have parents around me and I was around older people. So a couple of times I might not have gone to school, and I literally wrote myself a note, which I handed to the principals.
Yeah.
I was able to. Megan Benson was absent from school, wasn't feeling well, signed Megan Benson, and I had a giggle to myself underneath. I wrote Guardian.
Oh my
and
God.
I think it was something to do with that, like, striking thing for the teachers, that here's this kid who's got bright red dyed hair like Annie Lennox, who was a hero of mine for a phase, who's like, most of our school was a bit famous for not wearing uniform, actually. It's a bit of a tradition even in Mossman, because it was one of the only state schools, so they did get some of the motley crew, because we were surrounded by private schools all around, kept turning up to school, so they had to respect that, even though I was like this like slightly little wild child. But my brother was even wilder, so he often wagged all the time, whereas I turned up at school. school.
Wow. Did you end up being his guardian, or was he still with your mum?
He was older than me. He had periods between being at my mum's, a little bit at my dad's and at boarding school, but then he sort of got expelled from there. He was just acting out all sorts of stuff, but he's landed on his feet in his life, and he's an awesome dude. He just put it out there and said fuck you to people rather than me taking it in and processing stuff and thinking compassionately about everything and wisely about things. But in some ways, you know, some of these people that just like acted out at the time, they can just get on and move on, and they're just not such complex. They don't have to be such complicated people. Or complexity is beautiful. Like, I'm not dissing it, but it is really quite interesting how people do things differently.
You did your very first event though in high school, didn't you? Yes. What made you do this event, and tell us a little bit about it?
I was school captain, so I was president of the student council. We did projects and wanted to do something just to give everyone a wonderful experience. And I guess at the time I was exploring that sort of, you know, indie rock sort of stuff of the late 80s that was around, but bordering on punk grunge and all of the things that was like really iconic of that phase. And having lived down the road from the Mossman Hotel, a lot of that stuff was there. For example, who's doing the rounds at the moment is Ed Cooper, performing with other legends, like rehashing stuff. He's been doing stuff with some guys from the Necks in a group called Asteroid Ecosystem. But he's like a bit of a cult following from like back then. He used to play at the pub up the road. So I used to notice stuff like that and know kids older than me and go out to see bands like the Cramps and this and that. To be honest, most of the time I just thought it was so cool. It must have been healing some kind of like angst part of me. But to be honest, it's not the sort of stuff I'd listen to now. It doesn't particularly make me happy. I did like seeing Do Re Me back then. But anyway, there was a band called Crash Politics. I booked them and they had some kind of sharp manager and, you know, I just remember the sort of real non-budging, the expectation for bringing in big bucks and acting like rock stars and that, like most bands I know, talking to a school kid would have at least come to some compromises, but paid decent money, advertised it around the school and sent around and did announcements in the classrooms and also at the school. I had to do public speaking at the school assemblies as the
captain.
Yeah, but like someone nominated me. I didn't nominate myself. I wasn't born confident for speaking. I mean, I had a lot of, let's say, my self-esteem got knocked around a bit in terms of just my growing up and attachment disruptions I had and things like that. So I had a sort of particularly sensitive and slightly as an interesting mix between vulnerability and strength, we could say, and I think that's probably true to this point now.
That's why you connect to people as well, because of that vulnerability as well, and you're able to lead. So I think that's probably why people saw that in you when you were younger, and that's why you were voted to be school captain and probably, you know, like, oh, she can do it. If anyone can do it, you know, Meg can do it. So
there was something like that. I guess it's that thing of regardless of your insecurities, like that you see outside of that, and you can see other people's needs, you know, outside of that. And so I used to say to myself when I had to speak in public, like, my this occasion that's happening here is more important than my insecurities. And I also imagined there was a really cool girl when I was younger who was such a good school captain, and she was a real character, and she was slightly punky but also really solid and trustworthy, and I just looked up to her and I thought, it's my turn. I've got her in my mind because she was really cool. But yes, doing that gig didn't turn out so well because with a name like Crash Politics, all the kids thought it was some kind of political event.
Yes, it sounds like it.
But that was the band's name. Not having much experience with marketing, it was just like, we're going to do this at school, and all the teachers, everyone there thought it was amazing. It just, you know, it wasn't well attended. And maybe some of the Mossman parents thought, oh, gee, that band's a bit, bloody adult or something.
But
maybe.
that probably, well, that was the first event you organized. So still, it was something, probably a seed was planted, maybe, that this is something you wanted to do. Now,
I don't know. It was just something about wanting to share wonderful experiences with people. And it never really occurred to me I wanted to be an interior decorator. I love decorating and creating spaces, which is very similar with Music Hunter. I've often done decoration at events because I love the subliminal things you can do that people walk into a space and they don't have to do anything. They already feel they're lifted.
I totally get that.
I always loved that. My mum was quite good at that too in parties. She found, she was that person that found driftwoods and secondhand furnitures and actually one of her, here's an inspiration and a positive thing because, it's not good to only look at negatives and certainly she contributed some wonderful things. She used to have this little underground cafe at the back of our place called Cafe Debris, way before house concerts ever became a thing. Now, debris as in it sounds like cheese, but debris is also rubbish, right?
Yes.
So we had council cleanups, but we lived in Mossman. So, of course, council cleanups in a freaking, affluent environment was, you're going to find some decent things. But she found tractor seats and crates. So the cheaper end of things, she was cutting edge of rustic before all that stuff got into to trendy stuff. She used to put free mull out on the table for people as well. I grew up with this.
Yeah. But I think we were talking before, everything from, when you grow up, it contributes to who you are now.
Yeah.
So,
and she was quite happy and fun when there were people around, unless it got a bit too late, and then sometimes there were late night arguments. But not usually at the event. So, at the main part, she liked. Everyone wants to be happy. It's just sometimes people don't know how to do it. But I found that the musical event, she was more happy.
How did your love for the Blue Mountains? When did that start?
I caught a train up to go to Vipassana Meditation Centre at the age of 16. And it's a 10-day silent meditation and I was just interested to explore that. I remember being on the train and just going through Lura where you've got that view out to Mount Solitary.
Yes.
And I could see, the town below and I was like, wow, it's not just civilization on one bit and then the vastness on the other that you have to get to. These people's lives were in view of this.
I love that.
I actually did at some point down the track live in a street in Lura approximately 12 years ago now, and around the time that I started the music events with Music Hunter. And lived with that view from a 2-story house out to Mount Solitary, and I thought it was just lovely.
Yeah, there is something very magical about the Blue Mountains. So when did you decide to move to the mountains?
Well, as soon as finishing school, I had been then later co-housing with a couple of friends, and we had this kind of notion for a few years to try and save up and maybe get a share in a community somewhere. See, one of the things in the North Shore area was the contrast between, for example, my sort of low income but resourceful and quite progressive social values around social justice compared to quite a strong element of greed and materialism, and it was really quite present. And I think it led to me being slightly extreme in the opposite.
Yeah.
But also just noticing as having someone that had to pay my way through life even back then, feeling like a bit of a rent refugee from Sydney, feeling like Sydney was just too expensive, even back then. And moving up to the Blue Mountains. And I remember the very first house I rented in the mountains with these couple of people was a house on Lurline Street, a 3-bedroom house for $130 a week. From there, went to, I've lived lived in lots of places between Wentworth Falls and Mount Victoria, predominantly Katoomba and Blackheath. But
So you like to still share even now, or up until what point?
when I had my children,
Yeah.
I didn't choose the share house thing. Now, obviously, you can't, some people can have children with IVF, but I say my children. I've had a couple of significant relationships. One of them I met in America because I did go traveling in America for 6 months in North America between America and Canada. And that was after separating with the friends I was going to co-house with,
Yes.
ideologies and things like that, you get maturity and you see through some things that you realise aren't quite for you, and probably a few power trips and different things and one of I was in a relationship with an older guy, so he was one of them. So a few power imbalances and things. So I was just like, nah, I'm taking my money and going overseas. But that's life, isn't it? You've got to, life's for the living, you know, like you don't sit on the fence. You've got to experience stuff.
So when you were gone for that year, you came back and you moved back to the mountains.
So I met my son's dad over there, who was American, and he really wanted to come back to Australia and really felt like wanted to have a life together. I guess I'd had a couple of moments where I was slightly ambivalent about a couple of things there. You know, it's flattering when someone thinks you're it as well. Yeah. But pretty quickly, I was a single parent with my son from when he was 6 months old, and I was only 22.
Okay.
And I didn't have any family within close proximity. But I lived in the mountains, loved the mountains. Yeah. See, I'd actually been in the mountains, then went up to Bellingen, and then went overseas by the time I was 20. So I had 6 months in Bellingen. Yeah, I was thinking of becoming a Steiner teacher because I loved creativity with children. And one of my incomes when I was a young girl was babysitting. So I had, ways to make money when I lived out of home, as well as the fact that I went to Social Security and they gave me what was called Oz Study at 14 and a half, that they now would be illegal for them to give to a 14 and a half year old, but it was legal then.
Okay, so you've had your son, and where was he born?
I had 2 home births. So I had, he was born at home in Highland Street, Lura.
Okay.
And I had a midwife. Yeah, I was standing up when he was born.
Oh, my goodness.
Wow. I mean, that was how I was intentionally giving birth. I had the midwife and my partner there. And
wow.
And I'd heard that the voice was a really important part of birth from going to pregnancy groups, and I was often surrounded by older women having more than their first or second child in, meeting up in different groups and things, and went to a pregnancy dream group where we met for actually a year and a half, even though pregnancy is only 9 months. But because we decided after that, we thought it was so interesting, we decided that we would keep meeting up with the babies while they were suckling too, because there was really something unique about the psychological processes you go through when pregnant.
There is.
And the dreams just are so wild that I think it really is a psychological growth period of acceleration when you revisit, experiences of being a daughter and experiences of what you're going to consciously embark on as a parent and unconsciously. No one gets out of that. We all stumble into, things that are just hidden.
Sorry, and you have a daughter as well. Yes. So what's the age difference, or how? Okay.
3 years and 8 months. 3 years and 8 months. After I separated from my son's dad, I was single for a couple of years. So I was like, I like to have a couple of years being single after a relationship just to kind of reorient myself. But that felt like a really long time as a young woman, particularly with a child. So I met my daughter's Dad at the Bellingen Global Music Festival. Oh, here's another festival thing, because I met my son's dad at a rainbow festival in Colorado Mountains. Rainbow Festival is one of those things. It was its 20th year anniversary where people just bring things onto the land and set it up and make stuff out of the wood and the things that are just there, and then they spend, a few of the hardcore people spend months putting it back as it was.
Yeah.
And, you know, different things happen there. And I was, you know, being a tourist or traveller and came across that. So I met him at a festival. I met Javier at the Bellingen Global Music Festival. I was taking Malachi up on the single parent pension train tickets and staying on a community that I'd visited when I was a teenager with friends who had parents up there, multiple occupancy community, Bundagen on the beach. So I'd been visiting there since I was like 13, 14. Went up there and there's like a little South American community there, and I think Javier was on that side of it. And then, you know, it's a pretty easy, you see a single mum and you're like, you just know if you go and ask them, would they like a chai tea, they're going to say yes, because they got their freaking hands full, don't they? But yeah, that was cool. And then we just met there, and then he asked if he could visit and send a few things, and then the rest is history. He's quite a likable, gregarious character with some, you know, he had his nervous energy and too much of a love for coffee and some of the South American temperament, which, you know, even if he heard this, he would know it's true. But yeah, we're still friends, but definitely it was time not to be together. So I mean, those first relationships, it's quite heartbreaking, and it really goes deep, because I wanted to have a really beautiful family life based on you know, things in the past, and you know, it could be seen as like, you know, the resilience and moving on, a bit like, oh, you don't invest as much into family, but certainly I did have a lot of hopes into it. But I think that it's probably just simply that, you know, if you haven't expected a lot in life and you've gone through some disadvantaged, it takes a little while before you learn to set those expectations of how to be treated, and that you can put those things in place. And no one needs to be blamed for that. It's just human learning
and part of your story, and that's what makes you who you are and who your children are. You know what I mean? So, but you seem to have an interest for people from other countries, because eventually you did meet someone from Holland. So tell us a little bit about that relationship.
Yeah, and that one was also kind of meeting through a festival as well. These are my main significant relationships, I guess. Getting back to, you know, my values about music, here's the context and what led up to it. My grandfather had just died, and I had been on a trip up there to visit my grandfather, which I got to see, but he died of an accident. It wasn't expected. I was so happy that I'd gotten up to visit him in Queensland and been on the farm. And
was he in Grafton, or where was?
No, my grandfather was a Queenslander. My mum's father. She was a Queenslander, and my dad was a New Zealander.
Okay.
They just happened to meet in Brizzy, and then I was born in Grafton. My dad had a pharmacy there. But anyway, I didn't go there. But anyway, back to Granddad, amazing person that I felt an incredible amount of love for, and always loved visiting when we were kids. And the visits weren't quite frequent enough because, you know, it's logistics, and
of course,
you've got to get there. And I had this feeling I've got to go visit Granddad, and I wanted to take the kids up there. And so I did. And he had, you know, back pain and things. I gave him an hour and a half massage a day. He was like, oh, you should be a physiotherapist. Yeah. Anyway, 2 weeks later, he's died on a quad bike accident at the age of 76 on his farm. He'd had a few sort of health things happening and was on medications he didn't really like, and they were also looking at having to move off the land, but they'd lived on it for ages. But for me, I had a real sense of the country, a love of the country. I loved being up there, and some of the experiences going mustering when I was a child and horse riding and things. Just loved it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was quite sad, very sad about that, and went back up for the funeral. And then I was also getting my wisdom teeth out. So all these like really massive things happened. And I came out of the general anaesthetic getting all 4 wisdom teeth cut out, and they thought I was having a nightmare, but like my face was dripping wet with tears as I was coming to consciousness.
Yeah.
And I dreamed of sunset plains and the place that they lived on, and I was playing my grandmother's piano. I was learning piano at the time, and it was just such an emotionally intense time. And Javier and I were also separating. We were supposed to be going up there together. He didn't want to, and he was so I was supposed to be moving that weekend, and I was just like, I've had so much going on. I need nurturing. I am not missing out on our Blue Mountains Music Festival.
Okay.
I need nurturing.
Yeah.
I would help in the PNC because my son used to go to Katoomba Public. And so volunteering there was a sense of community, and it wasn't until after the festival I walked back down there the day after to buy a CD off a different band, Buraq, a Scottish progressive folk band. They were quite fun. And I'd arranged to get a CD the next day off them there. And then in the bar were the guys from the multinational super heavyweight folk band Mosaic, Andy Irvine and Donald Lonnies. They are legends of the Irish folk music scene, but this band had an Appalachian fiddler, an Eastern European musician from Budapest, Rans from Netherlands. Andy and Donald were Irish, but each of them had Japanese wives. The Japanese people love folk music. I can see how that happened. They're amazing.
Wow.
And, when they love something, they freaking do it well. They learn to play it really well too.
Wow.
And I didn't actually know who they were, which is another thing, is that I've actually always felt comfortable around musicians as people, and I didn't buy into too much of that starstruck thing of a hierarchy of someone's more important or even though I had, as I said, I had those self-esteem things, but my values were about equality. So that helped me overcome that kind of thing. So I just hung out, and I remember Renz walked me home. That's all. Like, we hung out. He walked me home, came back. It wasn't until another 4 years later that we met again. But what happened is I met them, and I ended up – Guy Davis was an American blues player, and he was also playing the Didge, and they were sitting outside in the car park of the Clarendon because they were all staying there. Yeah. We just sat around. I sung a few songs and stuff, and we were just jamming. And Renz was like, "Oh, it was so refreshing to just hang out with you and not have it like someone acting like a fan or trying to treat us any special," because I had no bloody idea who they were. And but it was great that I could tell that they were bloody good musicians. I was better off shutting up and listening and not singing too much. They were encouraging. And the idea of singing with soul and heart is more important than perfection when you're sitting around the fire, or there was no fire, but the proverbial fire around the car park. In that case, it was a really memorable night, and I think it was that was actually what Ren said. What he said that struck him about me at that time was that as a person, he was attracted to me because of the mix of vulnerability and strength. Because I guess I had so much going on. I was a bit raw, but I was, I was out there claiming my right to celebrate some things before I had to freaking pack up this house and figure out how to move and all of that stuff, So I did that because I knew that if I had to move without filling my cup up, I was going to be feeling shit and I had too much grief. So I went I went to the music for some resuscitation and had a great time. And then it was funny because Ren started sending me postcards.
Okay. Yeah, from wherever he was performing.
And some in Australia and some back over there. And then we hadn't seen each other for ages. And I noticed 4 years later they were on the music festival thing again. And I think I just walked up and said, "Oh, g'day, do you remember me?" And I quoted a story I'd written back to him in a postcard about when I'd moved into that house. And I get in there and put the washing machine on and all the things you do as a single mum, and you try to put it on tight and you test it a few times. You're like, oh, that's good. It's not going to blow. I'd done about, 5 washes. Well, one day I go out and I'm out for the whole day and I put the wash on and the whole thing had flooded and the kitchen had no drain and it wasn't legally built where it drains outwards, and it drained literally into the brand new carpet.
Oh,
and the place was flooded. And I get home. One of the kids I used to babysit when I was a teenager was visiting for the first time in years. And he was there, had been trying to grab towels, and I was like, Marky, just relax. Sit down. You're not going to even touch the sides, dude. Let's get our priorities straight. Here, I'll pour us a liqueur. We sat down, looked through the newspaper, and I was like, okay. It's called a steam cleaner that listed Blackheath. And I said, I've just gotten home. I've just moved into a house. It's got brand new carpet. The whole thing's flooded. And I've got no money. And he said, all right, I'll be there in 30 minutes.
Oh,
and
wow.
And, obviously I sorted him out in the end.
Yeah.
But he came and he just went through 3 times sucking the water up. But to know when it's gone too far, you just go, we're not just going to sit here trying to towel this stuff up, dude.
Yeah, we're going to have a
Let's
nice
get a
drink.
liqueur into us. Anyway, so I just thought it was a funny story. I shared that with Renz, and he was like, oh, yeah, with the floating cows in your flooded lounge room.
Yeah.
And he was like, do I remember you? Of course I do. And then, we were just inseparable the rest of the whole festival. It was just a predominantly 100% trustworthy friendship connection that I didn't even have the end game of result of thinking of romance. I just wanted to be with him. We just wanted to hang out and chat. And it just kind of evolved. He was like, oh, can I come back and visit you? And, came back to Australia especially to visit. And, he was like, oh, I'll stay anywhere. I said, well, you'll have to. I've got 2 kids. You can't just come and, and booked him into somewhere for the first bit. And then after that, he ended up just hanging out. It was so nice because the kids enjoyed him too, and so it definitely I would say Renz was the healthiest, most respectful relationship I've had. That probably really helped things settle in me. On top of that, I was spoilt with some of the best world-class music.
I bet.
And he was a really humble person. Everyone loved him. All the musicians gathered, and we had amazing music sessions and things, and he's just totally trustworthy.
And how long were you together?
Well, it was 2006 that we started to see each other, and he'd gotten me a ticket over there. I had a month over there. It was like, oh my God, a whole month where both my kids were with their dads. It was coordinated around the holidays.
Perfect.
And went over there. Oh my God, it was just a shock to my system to be treated so well and to not have children to look after.
Yeah.
But it was lovely, and he wanted to come back. We went through the immigration process and everything, and we got married at Evans Lookout in 2008. He had, various tours around the world because, as mentioned, the band members are all over the world. But that's just one of his projects. And normally when he's in the Netherlands, he'd get picked up for all sorts of gigs with all sorts of prominent Netherlands people. So in the popular music scene, cabaret, so one of their most iconic cabaret guys who does real commentary stuff on society, and he does televised stuff. And Renz is one of his most favourite trusted musicians. It's really, really big what he does there. He just gets picked up for gigs in between. Came to Australia, and he experienced like going back to kindergarten and felt this incredible devastation at his career, going from maybe playing in theatres where he could play to 1,000 people a few nights a week to someone occasionally ringing up and going, do you want to come and play at this Chinese restaurant for $75,
Oh my
and
gosh.
he would be like, he literally felt nauseous as a response. And it wasn't ego in any way. It was, you've got an art that you've done to share with the world. And
yes.
this is part of love is what you bring to the world. It's not just a romance, you know.
Yeah.
And his, you know, loving what you do and the craft that he's done since a child. And he didn't have another income. Like many Australian musicians, they literally have
Wow.
to. So I was really quite interested in the things I was learning about this, because having been a music appreciator, I was always that girl up the front dancing, and you know, I'd go out to live music. But I never really understood or got any appreciation of how little was left over for musicians after the costs or the venues or the advertising or the sound or all the elements of it. And also just sometimes how few people were there. I didn't mind if I was at an intimate concert, but you know, eventually starting to really see that and the impact on musicians, it was an eye-opener for me. And then all these years I had been training as a psychotherapist, family therapist, and working part-time and running my private practice, and also working part-time in Lithgow as an adolescent and family counsellor, and also being recruited at children's therapeutic camps for children of parents with mental illness, and all sorts of different things that I'd done. And
it seems like it was all coming together as well. You know, kind of
somehow in terms of the skills that I got to look at a problem systemically. You look at the context of something. You never look at something in isolation. You look at what are the interdependent factors that contribute to something succeeding or failing, or to a scenario in one's life if you're looking at therapy. And I remember when I was first starting with the hobby, let's say, or experiment. It was a bit of a social experiment to then sort of down the track try and create opportunities for respectful, dignified opportunities for musicians with full houses and something that the audiences will remember. So make sure the production's good, the light's good, the welcoming is good. Because, you know, hospitality is such a really important part of audience development too.
Yes, that's
you can't
true.
be a venue where you just treat people like an arsehole. They don't want to come back.
Exactly,
You know,
exactly.
And, so sorry about the raw language, but, you know, you get that sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. So with Renz, as he was starting to probably feel a bit down about probably living here in Australia. And
he loved Australia.
He loved Australia.
He really loved Australia, but he had a conflict. So it was a couple of years later. Now, he did get picked up he was starting to get picked up by some big people. Mark Seymour from Hunters and Collectors, and he and Mark were in a stage production called One Night the Moon, the one that was based on the Paul Kelly and Kev Carmody film One Night the Moon, based on the amazing story of the Aboriginal tracker and the lost kids. And it's a true story, but racism got in the way of finding the lost kids. Anyway, and it was quite an amazing story, and that happened at Malthouse Theatre in Melbourne, and there was the Mairead, I can't remember her name now. Anyway, she's a very brilliant musical director. There was amazing people there. Paul Kelly came to the opening. I was there, and Paul said to me, like in awe, he said, "Oh my God, how talented is this guy?" Which he was. Rance was like, he played 5 or 6 instruments himself during the space of that. There were several other musicians on stage who were all phenomenal. But what Renz brought to the stage was being a multi-instrumentalist. So he played the Irish pipes, which certainly by no means was his main instrument, but he came across Ian Mackenzie in the Blue Mountains, who was a local pipe maker, and one of Ren's, who would consider one of his best friends out here, and he loved them, pride and joy. Mandolin, fiddle, accordion, guitar, and I mean, they were the main things. It had other instruments, but and that was an incredibly moving stage play. However, and it was well-paid gig, and he was also, because he was he was really good with technicality, they actually paid him to transcribe some things into music that had been just recorded and stuff like that as well. So he got some decent work out of that, but it was when you're set up in a country where the gigs are more frequent and better paid, there's always a session music to get a musician to get you for something, or
and it's part of their culture, the European culture. They listen more, I think, to live music.
Yeah, I mean, they do love sport as well, if you think about them with football and stuff. But, one of the things that I really came to learn was Renz was really quite shocked and disgusted about how housing operates in Australia compared to what he thought to what was normal for him over there. And he couldn't believe the lack of security for renters out here, and also the profiteering that everything is geared for inflation. And actually their country was their social policies and things actually protected against that. And a lot of middle income people never bought houses and could live in them for 30, 40, 50 years because of the policies around it. And it wasn't a stigma, and you weren't lumped in housing commission zones and, stuff like that. So really, really different. And so what you look at there, which relates to, a passion of me becoming a music industry activist and following things like the New South Wales Live Music Inquiry, and already assessing the difference between Netherlands and Australia and disposable income.
Yeah.
I knew that it was the cost of real estate that was preventing our events to be sold out, because people have got so much disposable income. Can I afford this experience? No, I've got to do this and this because I'm buying this house and this is the price I'm paying on my life experience. So, I mean, before I even met Renz, I was a single parent, and I didn't want to have the suffering of wanting something I couldn't afford, and I didn't ever want to be saying I can't afford this valuable experience. And I said to myself, I am going to measure the success of my life by how much culture my children and I can experience. Because I know too many people that go, they can't afford it. And to me, that's poverty. Yeah. And to me, as part of that commitment to myself not being a resentful single mum was that I was going to be well connected. I was going to not be someone that was classified as an isolated, disadvantaged person. I was going to fill my cup up, and I was going to have enough love left over to share with my kids. They were going to do their music lessons. They were going to do their drama, their acting, their choirs, their dancing, and they did. And because I just thought, I actually thought the home ownership thing was just too ambitious and would lead to suffering, which would be a bigger robbery of my life. Right. Which is, if you think of it, I'm 50 now, and my kids are only just like 28 and 24, and now I've got a 12-year-old foster child. But if you think of it, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. And I didn't want to be at the end of my life just like not having had a colourful life.
Exactly.
And look at all the people that have busted their guts either buying or renting or something, and all these catastrophes have happened, like COVID or floods or fires, and some people can afford housing insurance. It's a tragedy to hear about the the people in Lismore now. And I'm not against – I would love to have secure housing, and now I'm at the spot where I'm actually contemplating it, and I realise why I did what I did in the past, because now that I've got enough for a deposit to buy somewhere not in the Blue Mountains, the suffering is beginning, because now I'm allowing myself to go through that and be suffering about what I can't afford.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Whereas before that, I literally just changed the framework of my value system and literally lived a completely content life, well connected, and, many huts in the community and my children, and living like a wealthy person. And I remember other double income families with two parents would go, wow, your kids never miss out on anything. And I can tell you, I never supplemented my income with anything illegal to do it. But just saying,
Yeah. And it's from your experiences growing up, I think, you know, with it's funny how it all sort of relates to what you're doing now. Now, we have spoken quite a long time. We still haven't gotten to the Music Hunter, but we're gonna get to that right now.
I mean, you can edit some out as you need because we're just telling stories.
No. But I think your story is part of why you're so passionate about Music Hunter, which we're going to talk about right now. Was it after Rents left that you started thinking about this Music Hunter idea?
Yeah. So Rents had said, I'm going to go back. And we had 6 weeks sharing the house, being in the house together during that time. That was, I was quite devastated. I hadn't thought it would come to that. And at the time, my self-care part of me kicked in, and I mean, once again, it's not on a budget level. I created myself a little holiday, but not many people would do this. I think I couldn't afford like my own room, so at a time of grieving, I still booked myself in a share bunk bedroom down at Coleroy. It wasn't a place I usually went to. I just thought I'll go to that, book into the YHA there. I got myself a journal and I gave myself 4 days. I know there was someone that did massages, so I booked in 2 massages. I cried at the beach. I went to the cafe and wrote for hours in the cafe. A friend came down and met me and had dinner with me there one night. So I wasn't completely isolated, but I just used that time to commune with myself. I had feelings at that time and thoughts about, making a difference in the music scene, because that stuff had bubbling away. And I guess it was like I knew it wasn't going to bring Wrens back, but I was thinking about all my friends left behind. I'd always been that person that my friends were musicians or artists, or just all my best friends have always been like that, probably because I was that one dancing up the front or what have you. Yeah, so the experience is more important than the insecurity. I've always done that. I did that ever since I was a kid.
I love that.
And
I love that.
And that's how you lose yourself in the music, and that's how you find yourself. It's not that I don't have the same crap as everyone else who's like, oh, I'm an introvert or whatever. I was quite an introvert. I mean, to scheme up some of these things, you have to get used to spending a lot of time on your own to even scheme up this stuff. It doesn't come out of nowhere. Yeah, I call myself an ambivert because that means I can do both introvert and extrovert. So I'd had that little self-nurturing vision quest time and heart healing stuff, and it was a tough time. And then Christine Wheeler and she runs a choir in Blackheath. She's an active folk musician. She was in a band called Wheelers and Dealers, and we went down to a Scorba gig at 505 in Sydney, the one that was in Cleveland Street, Surrey Hills, and it was a Thursday, and Scorba featured some amazing musicians like Lou Keek, who's been in the world-renowned Mara band, and many others. In fact, I met Lou from him and Rens playing together on the odd thing. So some really sort of top musicians find each other and they play with each other on projects. And I was aware of that band. Christine was sitting in as a guest musician. We went down there, go to Sydney.
Yeah.
There were 5 people in the audience.
Oh, you're kidding.
And so I was having this whole thing of like, this is part of the climate of that is one of the reasons why Rens probably couldn't really manage it.
Yeah.
And this was in Sydney. Yeah. But it was a Thursday and it was left of centre music, but the musicianship was still high quality. So I was thinking, if people don't know, they can't go.
Right.
So I was thinking about the interdependence, like there's a few factors. There's, how bands gather and communicate with and stay in relationship with their followers. There's how the venue does that. So people will just come back no matter what's on because they like the venue, they like the staff.
Yeah.
And then there's that additional promotion that happens that reaches out for new people and how you let people know. And sometimes that extra promoter, if it's something that the bands and the venues can't do. And I'd always thought, I'd heard venues blaming bands and bands blaming venues, and I thought that's nonsense. Everyone has got to make their impact. It's a collective impact and everyone's got to do it together and it's no one person's responsibility. But having an extra promoter, can do that. And back at that phase, I was hungry like a dog with a bone. Christine Wheeler described me like that in a testimonial once that she wrote. And just how like every event I did was carefully thought out for who the band was and who the audience might be and what the location might be. And I really liked that unique tailor-made thing. Obviously, when it comes to money, people that do cookie cutter things and things similar and keep systems, all those things become more economic over time. But I really enjoyed the art of audience development and thinking about experiments on ways to get people together. So, I mean, on the way back in the car with Christine, I said, that's it. I'm going to do something for that band and for your 5-piece bands. So 2 5-piece bands. We're going to do it at Blackheath Community Hall and we're going to pack the place out. Let's meet up for a coffee next week and let's start scheming our plan. So I came up with all sorts of schemes and plans, and Christine contributed some schemes and plans, and it was just something I hadn't thought I was going to do. I just wanted to do that. It was just one thing I wanted to see what would happen. Yeah, we ended up with 180 people paying $30 each, and I even had some food. Got people to bring their own wine and wine glasses, and but we served some soup as well. So we ordered crockery for that and dressed the tables so they looked good, had amazing lights, amazing sound, and it was really, and I got a bunch of friends and even some of their kids joined in. So I had like about 10 people to get stuff out to the tables really fast as volunteers. One in charge of that got a bit of money, but people just came and, the kids got little bits of money too. But like people who wanted to, lots of helpers, so that not too much was expected, but they still got their concert experience for free. And, so you work it out, win-win situation. And it was, it was great. And we raised some money, also enough as well as paying each band member $200 each. So 10 musicians, $200 each, so $2,000, as well as the sound, the hall, the promotional printing and stuff. Yeah. We also had about $1,000 to give to the Blackheath Highway Action Group, who were advocating back then for, more stuff happening on railways and less on highways and stuff. And so it was that was part of the strategy, to bring in people who cared to get together and have a speaker. But it was like you'd want people to be able to get together just for music, but realising that was hardcore to get. People find it hard to let themselves say yes to a treat.
Yeah, that's true,
just
isn't
for
it?
itself. I don't, of course, but experiences are very important.
They are, and it's probably harder now. Has it been harder now over the last 2 years because of COVID? Because I know that your audiences had to be reduced, and you had to follow all these rules.
Yeah. In relation to the COVID times, as soon as restrictions lifted that you could have 20 people at home and you were able to go out into restaurants with 4 square meters.
Yes.
Nothing else was happening in the mountains until probably quite a few months after that. But I realised there was no excuse if restaurants were open not to have some music in there, even if it was only 19 people in that downstairs space at the Avalon. Hadn't done anything there yet. Those guys had thought Music Hunter would be a good fit for them because they've got a kind of quirky sort of eclectic kind of setting, and some of the because I always wanted to create opportunities that didn't exist, and there wasn't enough quality platforms for rather kind of perhaps somewhat unique performers. They're not your typical pub gig, and musicians don't like playing those gigs where they're just background music anyway, unless they're a loud rock band. They actually much prefer to be in a situation where you're in the pocket with the audience and they're hearing everything, and that you're kind of in a zone together. Than being
just background music.
So Music Hunter never did that, because I was trying to fulfill healing the hearts of musicians who feel somewhat disposed of even before COVID. So with COVID, I stepped up to that mission again and felt that at a time where everyone's just streaming stuff and getting donations that way, that I could provide a real face-to-face experience within the laws and restrictions and that 19 people still mattered, and that for a band having their first concert in, that time was, well, I was going for duos predominantly in the tour in the series as I set it up, the Afternoon Delight series, because I wanted to, if you just had two musicians, it would still be, I literally personally guaranteed the musicians $200 each, because I know it's not a fortune, but they know what they're getting.
Yes,
I figured they've had so much uncertainty.
Yeah.
And I still had my full-time income, my full-time job. Music Hunt has been like my second full-time job on top of my full-time work. So I felt fortunate that I had that, and I was prepared to take the risk and carry the loss if it didn't work. I didn't want it to carry the loss, but I thought, sheesh, 19 people, how hard can it be? All I got to do is get 19 people along. Yes, people are COVID cautious and COVID anxious and all of these things, but there was likely to be 19 people. And certainly most of the time it was sold out as a series. And, I had my loyal email news base where people, get news via that, and I've built that up over the years. And so, and the Avalon had their email news, and we didn't really need to advertise in the newspaper for such a small amount. Although at the end of the series there was a bit of a kind of write-up about what we'd achieved and how many, because I did weekly gigs, even though normally I prefer to just do a monthly gig or at times a fortnightly gig occasionally in the month as enough to as an output, because you've got to do all that behind the scenes work. And because of this, and because it was only 19 people, and because musicians really needed a lift, and so did the audiences.
Yeah, that's true.
So lots of people at the time, in terms of my social inclusion values, lots of people couldn't book into anywhere as a single because every time you've got a single, you've got to have that extra space around you, and you had to do, at a minimum, book 2 people. Because of COVID, there was no way I was going to exclude single people. They needed to come out more than anyone. They've been living alone. Or, not always living alone, I guess. Sometimes people co-house, but I was living alone during the COVID time. Well, I had my foster child, but as an adult, I was the only adult at home during all of those lockdowns. So as soon as that happened, I did 2 things. That weekend it was coming up to my birthday, so I got 18 people over with 2 musicians, Gary Daly and James Greening, and all within the legal parameters of what you could do. Gave them $200 each. Then next day I had 3 young musicians, Ollie Sattler, and a few others. So 3 young musicians, and had them outside and had the fire, and again, strict limits on what you were actually allowed. Then the very next week started the Afternoon Delight series with the 19 people. So as just opportunities to give people work and to enjoy that for us to
just to get out of what we've been going through. I know what you mean. Just some sort of entertainment. And and
you know what, I made some new friends this year during the Afternoon Delight series, because some of the characters are quite like me. It never fazed me to go out to live music on my own, because I'm like, I don't know if I can coordinate all these people who are a bit not sure what they're doing and can't commit, or too much hard work. I'll just go out and I'll meet other people like me who know where to go, which is go out to live music. So I always felt at home with the randoms I met out at live gigs, because their value systems matched mine. Anyway, it was fabulous, because I had a number of people that had been living alone who were realising they'd been quite isolated and vaguely knew me, or I might have vaguely known them. They started coming along, and they got to know each other. I was like, oh, do you guys want to sit together as a group? So it was like a great friendships and connections. And some people just came every week. Came like this little club. And one of my mum's old friends, who I used to babysit his children, he lives up here, and he was like, okay, I've just caught on to this about halfway through the series, and he's like, book me a permanent table. I'm coming every week. I'm bringing either 2 or 3 people.
Yeah.
And he just brought different people every week and he did it.
Yeah. Wow. That's one thing I do admire about you is you're always out in the community doing something, getting people involved, and you always think of others. I think that's just so beautiful. We might wrap this up now, but I really would like you to come back because I do want to talk about the other thing that's really important in your life. But I want to just ask you one question. What has been the biggest music event that you have organized and one that you feel really proud of?
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like choosing a musician to say what's my favorite album or a writer to say what's my favorite book. And when I've heard people answer that, they say that's like picking which is my favorite children.
Yes.
And then, and so, but if I'm allowed to give a top few.
Yes, that's fine. Yes, well, that'll be great. That'll be
reasons,
great. Okay.
Yeah. Wow. Amazing. Okay. Well, one of my all-time favorite high energy, high vibe nights was sold out at the Girin with Mountain Mocha Kilimanjaro super heavyweight funk band from Japan. So they are the coolest. I've got a YouTube clip people can listen to on my Music Hunter project's YouTube
I'll add that
channel.
onto the show notes as well. So people
Has got
can,
me introducing it. It's back in about, 2013 or something or somewhere in thereabouts.
Yeah.
And that was such a high vibe. I loved it. It was so good. And everyone keeps feeding back to me about that. Tuba Skinny was another amazing night, also sold out in the Girin Hotel. Obviously, when I did stuff at those pubs, I'd often add a bit of extra decoration at the entrance as a bit of a welcome and, have some fabulous door staff on to welcome you and just, and be that MC to connect with people. In some way, that very first event was really unique in terms of what an amazing event that was and how much thought went into it. I only paid myself $200 after working on it nonstop for 2 months as well. But it was a social experiment and wanted to get the outcomes, wanted to get the quality, wanted to just see if it worked and make sure that we could pay the musicians and everyone left with dignity and it was just great. And then in terms of a real amazing highlight was being able to collaborate with Blue Mountain City Council in the Katoomba Live and Local Festival. They had me on as the event manager and curator. So I got to select 80 performers performing in Katoomba and I got to program to represent diverse interests and demographics in the Blue Mountains. So very egalitarian in terms of there was at least 25% of our performers were youth. We had some seniors. We even had a couple of people with disabilities. We had 50% of our performers, literally 50% were female of actual performers.
Wow.
We had multicultural groups represented. We weren't expected to do the outcome of creating a website, but we did that. We delivered that. Music Hunter chipped in to do this was an extra initiative outside the funding specs, but as part of it to do a music industry workshop that I coordinated. I got some extra funding for and donated all my time for to do that as part of helping kids get ready to have a music video clip. So we got KFM Media to video the youngsters, anyone under 24 actually, I think we did. And our youngest one was Allegra Dunning, who at the time it was her very first appearance. So I could say I helped bring her out to the public and then, she's amazing. Yeah. And I gave her an opening spot during the opening ceremony, which was obviously really good for her because a lot of people picked up her abilities there. Yeah. Aurora Lee, she also had her debut performance there. So we had all these people and we had the live music officer invited up to that. The Bendigo Bank sponsored that. And as a result of that particular mentoring aspect, which was outside the the council did want to see mentoring happening, which was an undercurrent of just people learning to apply and having to get their ABNs and all the things that were an underlying factor of helping people, even if they get their shit together, literally, for getting their application, even if we couldn't get them on, because we had easily twice the amount of people apply to what we could give work to. And it was a case of demographics, it was a case of diverse programming, certainly wasn't, and it was a case of what's appropriate to the venue, because it was supposed to be, in many cases, in smaller venues. We literally had to get a bigger venue to make sure we could host some of those sort of 90s grunge young bands, or big, Rachel Brady with her big rockabilly, or, stuff that couldn't have just been in a gallery, or, and deserved a proper stage. This particular initiative was supposed to be something that demonstrates to people that live music brings people out, and when they come out, they spend more money. So the shops collected data on what their trade was that day versus a day where they didn't have someone performing in there. And the trade definitely went up on all the businesses, and it was funded. But I got an award as in the inaugural Blue Mountains Creative Leaders Awards for
in 2018. I think.
For mentorship. And that was related to some of the specific additional stuff, I think, that happened, that Music Hunter did kind of outside the council contract. So I was able to deliver a lot more than what they expected. Had some help, shared some of my money so that I could get a good website with the help of Brad Diedrich and Chris Cannell. But I didn't have to do that. But I wanted it to look good. We couldn't really keep the upkeep of the website anymore, because which is a shame, because it cost money and it was a one-off festival. But I was just thinking I really should be putting up some of the old PDFs and stuff of the programs on my website so people could see some past projects.
I can add a lot of those things on the show notes for this podcast. So we can do that too. Every little bit helps. And
I just thought, it shows people a bit about what happened. That was a great initiative with Create New South Wales and the Live Music Office. And the Live Music Office has been incredibly active around helping remove some of the barriers and red tape and things that prevent a thriving live music scene in Sydney, including just areas where things have been restricted, or people can make complaints about venues if they've bought there later and it was already a live music thing. They've now brought in the thing to kind of have a respectful thing going, this is a live music precinct. If you move into this area, you don't have a right to shut down this pre-existing venue, and just different things like that.
That's good. That is good. Like you said something earlier, and I did read it in some of your notes about you being an activist for musicians. You are a voice for them.
It's a music industry activist. Well, definitely, if I didn't have another income, I couldn't be funded to do what I'm doing, because the effort that you put into it pays me in other ways, through social capital, through my sense of connection, through the community, through the fact that I'm getting to experience every single live music I set up. Unless occasionally I might have something else to do, and that's very rare, and I'll put someone else on charge. But I experience all of these gigs. How lucky am I?
You're so lucky, actually. I think it's amazing. I think it's amazing, and you actually really inspire me as well. Just from reading your story, from how you grew up and how you've come to be the Meg Benson, the music hunter. I love it. I really, really love it.
I love to blow people's preconceptions, because, that thing of being like, a disadvantaged person growing up with a single mum, moving out of home, a young single mother. And then, I just love it when people go, well, if these are the predictive factors that should lead with a deterministic outlook on life, people would just go, well, you're going to be pretty stuffed up for a while, aren't you? That the generalistic statistics would tell you that. But I love to defy that and just go, where there's the will, there's the way,
It really blows my mind just from your story. I feel like there wasn't even a mentor to look up to you. Like, you just did it yourself. Just were so strong. And I think that vulnerability we spoke about and that strong leadership mixed together. It makes you who you are, and it all stemmed from your childhood and what you're doing now. So it's been so lovely having you here today. I'm just so grateful, and I'm going to get you back because I do want you to talk about the other as well.
Other dimension.
Other
of life.
dimension.
Yeah.
That's it. That sounds much better.
Yeah, well, it
And,
is a whole other aspect of my life. But I just want to say thank you to you.
Yeah, no worries.
One thing that's always stood out to me about you, Evelyn, is your capacity to truly appreciate people's lives, and that really comes across in the ceremonies that you conduct that I have just by chance been at. As there's wonderful things. You're at all spectrums of life, marriage and death, and it can all happen. And you're an absolute inspiration to me as well. And thank you so much for honouring me here and being interested in the story.
Oh no, that's been lovely. Thank you. You're making me cry. Okay, thanks again. It's been absolutely a pleasure.
Thank you so much for your company. Please tune in next week to Life's Rich Tapestry, where you will hear another courageous conversation spoken from the heart.